Welcome to our food waste panel for this evening. My name is Lindsay Payne. I am the Director of Service Learning here on campus and an Assistant Professor of Practice in Environmental and Ecological Engineering. And I'm also the Chair of the West Lafayette Go Greener Commission. First, before we start, I do want to thank our sponsors tonight. So the Center for the Environment was really integral in making this whole event happen. Lynn, wave in the back. There's our fearless leader in all of this. I also want to thank the Purdue Student Government, the Sustainability Committee specifically, for helping advertise this event, get students here. And then we have one more, and that is the West Lafayette Go Greener Commission for sponsoring this event. So tonight we're going to hear about food waste, and we are going to talk about how it's lost, its recovery potential. We will demystify food waste labels, and we're going to learn about local food waste recovery systems and how students have been very active, involved in supporting and enhancing those systems across our campus. So we have four fantastic panelists tonight. Our first panelist will be Dr. Abby Engelberth. She is an assistant professor in agricultural and biological engineering, as well an associate professor, as well as an associate professor in environmental and ecological engineering. We also have our second panelist, which is Jinyi Huan, and he is an associate professor in food science. Dave Henderson joins us as a utility director from the wastewater recovery facility from the city of West Lafayette. And then our final panelist is Madison Hodges, who is a senior in environmental and ecological engineering, and she is also a West Lafayette Go Greener commissioner. So we are going to start off with Dr. Abby Engelberth. So Abby, you have the floor.
Thank you. So I'm going to stand to present because I don't know how to sit and present. It's not in my nature. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the resources and some of the definitions that we think of when we think of food waste. And I'm going to just go over here. So food waste is kind of in two different categories. There's food waste, which is the part that is plate waste. So the things you don't eat off your plate, scrape into the garbage. Spoiled food, peels, rinds, the things we can't digest, the things we can't eat. It's considered inevitable. It's sent to animals or to be composted or to be landfilled, just sent off, and it's waste. There's also what's considered food loss, and food loss are things that occurs during kind of the processing portion. So, in taking corn into making it from corn off the field into something that we're going to eat, there's losses of food along the way. So there's both food waste and food loss. And food waste is inevitable. Like you can see here, there's a lot of portions of food that we can't even eat. So you're not going to eat orange peels. So don't feel bad about ever throwing them out, because if you eat them, then you're going to feel really bad about doing that instead. So there is some amount of food waste that is inevitable, but we have ways and we're trying to find more ways to mitigate some of that. When we're thinking about how much of this stuff there really is, so food waste is that low quality material that we sent off, about 56% of food waste that ends up in the landfill is from residential resources. 26% is from restaurants, and then 5% or so is from industrial resources, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about because that's my kind of area of expertise. But there's about 38.4 million tons of food waste produced in 2014 in the US. Some of these numbers are a little old. They're not updated every year as they're not measured every year. But there's a lot that happens that comes from residential resources. And that is most of the residential and commercial resources are some of the biggest actors in this. Food loss occurs from the field, distribution, post-harvest, during processing, and during the consumer portion of that. So food losses along the way. It's made up of kind of broken down into mostly lipids, some carbohydrates, proteins, so there's lots of fats in there. And in industrial processing or industrial food waste, it's a small portion, but it's really point sourced and it's more homogeneous. And you want to go to the next one? And I'm going to talk a little bit more about the industrial process food waste. But one of the reasons why this is so difficult, it's such a big issue, is that there's a really potential impact from just disposing this food in the landfill. In 2014, there were 29 million tons of food waste that were sent to a landfill. It's really difficult to handle this organic matter that's resulting from the decomposition. The nutrients in the food never return to the soil. So in composting, all those nutrients are turned back into something else. It's a better system, but when we send them off to the landfill, it just doesn't do what it should do. And it also contributes to global warming, as there are greenhouse gas emissions that occur. So as the food is decomposing, it turns into methane and carbon dioxide. In 2017, 14.1% of the methane emissions from landfills were from food waste alone. So this is kind of a big issue. And there was a study that found that if food waste were diverted from landfills, that would be the equivalent of taking 1 out of 5 vehicles off the road. So there is a significant portion of food waste in the landfill that has an environmental impact. It also, if we reduce the amount of food that is wasted, we save resources. So wasted food not only wastes food, but it also wastes water, gasoline, energy, labor, pesticides, land, fertilizers. All these things that go into making the food in the first place have been kind of used for nothing because now the food is just discarded. And so when we throw food in the trash, we're throwing away much more than just food. And this is the recovery hierarchy, upside down pyramid from the EPA. And if you go to this website down here, Sustainable Management Food, you can click on each of these areas and kind of see what is being done and what is potential mitigation areas that can be used to reduce the food waste. So the first, at the very top, the thing that we want to do and look at the most is reducing the source. So reducing the amount of food that is wasted. And we'll talk a little bit more on this panel about how we can reduce some of our own food wastes and what are, how to store things in your fridge appropriately. What are some of the labeling dates? What does that mean exactly, and how closely do you need to adhere to them? And then the last thing we want to do, the last resort, is send it to the landfill. Okay. Next one. And I want to talk just a little bit to plug my own research about industrial food waste. So this is end-use potential. So what I look at is, next one, really how do we upgrade food waste? So like I said, there's some amount of food waste that is inevitable. So food is produced, goes to households, food industry, and industrial processing, which then also goes to households and food industries. But the industrial processing, they have a lot of waste that are generated that can be used in some higher value products. So we looked at both anaerobic digestion, which we'll talk a little bit more about today, and there's a lot of downstream processes you can do to convert the carbon in the food waste into some specialty chemicals or things like that. So there's a lot of different things that can be done with the food that is wasted, and I am targeting industrial food waste because, next slide, I think the next slide is going to say what I wanted to say. Uh-oh. That's all right. The next slide says something really great. Okay, so we need to what we call valorize, and this is a term that's used a lot in upcycling. It's basically finding a better use for. It's not used in any other area that I have found, but there's kind of two main things you can look at: specialty products from food waste, and then electricity and power generation. So specialty products include things like lactic acid, which can be used as a precursor to polylactic acid, phenolics, antioxidants. You can make ethanol. There's a lot of different things that you can do with these industrial wastes. Next. And why I'm focusing on food waste specifically from industry is that it may not be the biggest contributor, as it's only about 5%, but it does not need as much of a complex collection system. So from residential areas, collecting all that food waste is really complex because we're all distributed. We're all around the place. So, but from industries, you can go point source from place to place to place and get a lot of material all at once. It's fairly homogeneous or homogeneous in composition. So when you get it and you want to upgrade it into something else, there's not this hodgepodge of stuff in there. So targeting industrial food waste allows you to really have a set process that you can use to upgrade it, because it's always going to be the same type of thing coming in, and you're not going to be surprised that suddenly there's an influx of like chicken when you're expecting, I don't know, cauliflower. So there's that. And then it also creates a demand for inedible, spoiled, or unattractive foods. So in industrial processing, a lot of times when food is harvested, only the prettiest stuff goes to the grocery store, and some of that ugly stuff is sent on for something else. But we can also use that as part of the food waste, especially the spoiled stuff, because no one's going to eat that. Next one. And looking at this, there's a lot of potential for upgrading some of these things. So we looked at all of these different industries and looked at the comparison between if we were to take all the stuff and we were to upgrade it into some specialty chemical versus if we were to upgrade it into methane. We would obviously get a lot more revenue if we were to do a specialty chemical than methane, but both of them are still going to divert greenhouse gases from the landfill. So depending on what the waste is itself, it can be upgraded into something much more valuable. Now those residential wastes and those commercial wastes, those are going to generally be digested through anaerobic digestion to make methane, because there's a hodgepodge of stuff. But the industrial things we can be a little more specialty and niche with. The environmental impact, we found that creating specialty products from industrial waste, we could recover industrial food waste that could mitigate 190 million metric tons of CO2 annually. So by diverting this from directly going from industry, making it into something else, not going into the landfill, we're going to reduce the amount of carbon dioxide equivalent produced. And then diverting to anaerobic digestion reduces greenhouse gases by about 50%. And then emissions from untreated food waste can reach up to 89 equivalent CO2 per ton. So as we can recycle and reuse this food waste, we'll really reduce the global carbon dioxide and methane production. So that's another big goal. Food waste is inevitable, but it does not need to be as voluminous as it currently is. So we're going to have it, but let's not have quite so much. Let's find ways that we can use it to a better advantage or to a better end goal, and how do we prevent some of this stuff in the first place. Industrial food waste is generally homogeneous. It can be more readily converted into higher value products, and conversion via anaerobic digestion is possible, and it can reduce emissions associated with food waste disposal. So that is what I have to tell you about. And so if you have questions regarding any of this, please ask those. And then Dr. Wong is going to talk about some of the stuff that he works on. So thank you.
Did we not pull this one up, Lynn? Okay, hold on. I have them on my desktop.
Right there. Nope.
While we're pulling this up.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I can do it on this. Is that the one I sent you, or I sent you?
Yes.
This is one you emailed, yeah.
Oh, okay, it's fine.
Was some of the chemistry involved? Well, it all depends on what you're going after. So a lot of it is through like microbial fermentations. So producing a lactic acid or ethanol or any of those types of things would be a microbial conversion. But then there's also like recovery of antioxidants and phenolics. It would be from, it'd basically be like those are things that are already in that waste stream. So like from citrus peels, you can extract out like limonene, which is a really high value solvent, but it would just be an extraction process. So it kind of is a bit of finesse between what is possible to do with that waste and what is already inherently in it that you can exploit. Is that helpful? Okay. Any place that manufactures food. So, and a lot of this stuff is not being done right now. So this is all a little bit pie in the sky type of deals. But you could go talk with Frito-Lay and see what kind of waste they're producing and say, you know, hey, can we figure out a way to do something cooler with that than whatever you're doing with it now? And right now we don't often know like what exactly is being produced, what is happening to it, and what the volume is, because that's not information that is necessarily needed to be shared, so people don't necessarily know. And that's another thing I'm trying to do, is get a handle on what is the resource base that is out there right now, because we don't necessarily know. Like, we do a really good job of tracking like hazardous or toxic wastes, but just wastes in general, there's not a lot of tracking of that. Whew.
You're off the hook. You're good.
So I can, yeah. Okay, good evening, everyone. So after Dr. Engelbert, she talks about the industrial waste utilization and valorization, I would like to talk a little bit more about the household food waste. So I gave a title as food waste in supply chain, but as you can see, basically this is a food supply chain. It includes several stages. So the food normally start from farming stage, right? So including like crop cultivation, animal raising, and then after the harvest, and then send it to the manufacturing plant, turn the raw materials into food product. And then you can see, that after turning to the food product, you can buy it at a grocery store or retailer, and then you bring it back home and cook it to prepare your dinner, for example. And then, as Dr. Engelbert just mentioned, so every stage in the food supply chain, they will generate food waste and loss, right? So according to what definition just Dr. Engelbert mentioned, so if the food is discarded at the stage from the farming stage, and then harvest and processing and storage and distribution, so they consider as a food loss. But if it's discarded, the food is discarded at the retailer, restaurant, food service, and household, then considered as a food waste. So now we know it's well known that 1/3 of the food produced for humans is either wasted or lost, right? So some study, they even report the higher number. It's up to like 50%. So now we have the idea, actually food loss is different from food waste, right? So if we take a look at the global scale, so you can see that in developing countries, because of technical limitation, actually food loss is a bigger issue because the food is damaged or destroyed before it reaches to the consumers. For example, farmers in Africa, they lost nearly 40% of the food they grow. They cannot even reach the market to the consumer. Okay, it's because probably like they don't have a proper storage system, and then and probably like weather issues, storm, drought, this kind of thing. So they have to lose nearly 40%. But in contrast, in the developed country, just like the U.S., you can see food waste is a problem. Okay, because the edible food, I'm saying the edible food, is discarded prematurely or unnecessarily. So, as you can see, average American, they waste about 20 pounds of the food per month. That's a lot, right? I hope I can lose 20 pounds from my body in 1 month. That would be great, but unfortunately, it never happened. So now we know that as we're talking about the US scenario, so food waste is the issue. So who should be responsible for that? So the number here is probably a little bit different from what you saw in Dr. Engelbert's slide. But anyway, it's showing that actually household residential is the main contributor for the food waste. As you can see here, 40% or 50%. So it depends on the report. and then after that it's a restaurant, and then grocery store. So I'm going to focus more on the household food waste, and then there have been many factors or many reasons identified contributing to the household food waste. You either buy too much, and then you don't have you have improper storage to make the food just go bad, and then you have to discard some parts of food when you're preparing it, like the peels, the bone. You have to, and then sometimes you discard the leftover. And then another issue is that you're making the portion which is too big. You cannot finish them. You cannot clean your plate. You have to throw them away. But there's one important factor I want to talk about today is that confusion over labels. Okay, I'm not talking about price label, and it's something else. So here I'm talking about date labels. So how many of you? I just want to know how many of you, when you do grocery shopping or when you take a food from your pantry or refrigerator, you'll spend few seconds taking a look at the label, about the date label like this. Yeah, some people do, right? Yeah, in addition to price when you do shopping. So I believe you can see there's a lot of labels just like this, like expires, bound, used by, sale by, better, if used by, best by. Anyway, so it looks very confusing, right? So do you think that I really understand what they actually mean? Assuming that today is the 22nd, right? So if there are 6 foods over there, and then they have the same date listed, put it on September 21st. Okay, today is 1 day past, right? So you have this food, so what do you think? You're going to finish all this label, you're going to finish all of them? You say 1 day, probably fine. 2 days, okay. 1 week, well. So what do you think? Do you really know what that means? So because I believe it determines that you're going to throw them away or not, right? But what does it actually mean? So it's very confusing, I know, because in fact, our federal law doesn't really regulate the use of date labels on most of the food products. What does it mean? It means the manufacturer can label whatever they like. That you can use the best by, used by, whatever. You can use good through, enjoyed by. You can use everything. So there's except for some specific type of food, most of the food, they are not regulated. So that's the reason. And then, but there are indeed some differences among these labels. So they can be categorized into 3 types. Okay, so if you see the expires on or used by, manufacturers they're trying to tell you that the food may not be safe to consume past the date listing. Okay, that's a safety issue. Okay, so the thing is that you better to discard them. Okay, that's a may not be safe, but that's a safe. You can think of that as a safety indicator. Okay, but there's others. There's other one. It's called best by or best before, good through, this kind of thing. It's actually the manufacturer's recommendation for consuming the food at the best quality. The best quality means that even if it's 1 day past, 2 day past, it may not be that crispy, may not be that juicy, the color doesn't look that good, but it won't kill you. Okay, it won't get you sick. Okay, so that means that you don't really have to throw them away. Okay, and then there's another thing you can see called sale by. Okay, sale by. So that's exactly something as a consumer we don't really have to worry about because that's for the purpose of the grocery store inventory management. They just want to make sure that how many days they put it on the shelf listed, and after they will rotate that. So that's for the management purposes. Okay, so if you before this slide, if you have no idea what they are really about, don't worry, you are not alone, because there was a study conducted 2 years ago. Okay, so there's a survey. Okay, they reached out to some participants in the US, and then they asked them, so do they really know what those labels mean? Then you can see you can see the three types of label. The first one is indicated food quality, and then second labels indicated food safety, and then the label send the message to store. So you can see, for the first one, the indicated food quality, actually there's about like 35%, they have no idea, okay, according to their responses. And then for the second type, indicating safety, that's a big issue, right? You don't want your food unsafe. But in fact, it's about like 45 or even up to 50. The people responded that they didn't understand. And then the last part is sell-by. Okay, people got better idea, but there's nothing about consumer. That's for the management purposes, right? So what does that mean? And then even worse, the same survey, they tell that actually only 1% of the participants, they responded that they answered correctly about the information that state labels are regulated by the federal law for only few specific type of food, including baby food, like infant formula, or eggs for some states. It depends on the state, okay? So what does that matter? What are the consequences? If people don't understand what the label telling you, they will end up with throwing away too much food, right? So you can see in the same study, you can see that 84%, the participants that responded that they will at least occasionally discard the food close or past the date on the label. And then 37% of the consumer, they always, or usually, they discard the food close or past the date on the label, no matter what the date is. Maybe it's just sell by date, they just throw it away. Okay, because to them, they are the same. Sell by, use by, well, okay. So that's the issue. Because this resulted, it means like a misunderstanding of the food labeling, like date labeling, has contributed to 10% of the food waste. Okay, so that's a big issue. So, and then even you know that expiration date means the safety. It's about the safety, right? But I want to tell you from the food science perspective. So actually those expiration dates, they might be inaccurate. What does that mean? Because from the manufacturer point of view, if they have a different type of product, if there's a food with a shorter shelf life, like 1 week, 2 weeks, or 1 month, they may be able to test it before they put it in the market. But if for some food which is longer shelf life, 6 months, 2 years or something, they will just make guess. Or do some modeling work, or to refer to their other manufacturer's expiration date. That's what they will do. So they will normally make it more conservative. Make it more conservative, and then for for the safety purposes, for sure. And another thing is that they don't mind you throwing it away and coming back to buy more. Well, okay. So you can see, I just showed you some examples. So for milk bread, if you see that, okay, it's it can be 2 days after the expiration date, most likely it can still edible. I want to make sure that this term is edible. Now, they won't taste great, but it's edible. And then about the salami, ham, yogurt, it's about 5 days after expiration date, it's still edible. And then you can see if it's on dry food, they have a low water activity. And then even like a processed food, canned food, they have been thermally processed. It can be 1 year after expiration date, it's still fine. Okay? But I want to say, don't misunderstand, don't go back to pick up all the expiration and then put it as a dinner. Don't do that. It means that they have to be stored properly and then cooked properly, following instruction. And then you need to take a look, smell it to make sure that there's nothing unusual on there before you eat it. Okay. Then you may think that, oh, okay, this is very informative talk. It just tells you don't believe anything. Okay, not really. So because the USDA actually they developed the app, so they categorize most of the food products, and then to tell you that how long it can be stored in your refrigerator, freezer, or even pantry. So I want to quickly show you the web page. Here. So this is the Food Keeper app. This app, it can be downloaded by, I believe, both Android and Apple. So I think you can find them. So you can see they have lots of categories: baby food, baked food, and then beverage or something. And then if you say the dairy product is more perishable, then you can see that cheese curd or buttermilk, and you can click that. And then that's the information tell you. So freshness and quality, this item should be consumed within, you can see here. If you put it in the refrigerator from the day purchase, about 2 weeks, and if you put it frozen, then it will be 4 months, okay? And then no matter what the expiration date tells you, but that's a recommendation made by the USDA as a guideline, okay? So, and then just return to, yeah. So, and then, yeah, there's some other products like say meat or even fruit, seafood. You can easily find fresh or whatever. Yeah, cooked fish. Or yeah, that's some recommendation. You can find it. Okay, so the takeaway message from the food science is probably the takeaway message might not be that scientific. I want to tell you that trust your best judgment about the food you have before you eat it, before you cook it. Smell it and look at it. Is it unusual black dots or like a slimy? So when you touch it, smell it, trust your sensory judgment. And then, but don't test your gut. Don't trust your gut. Don't try that to put in your gut. And yeah, it's not the best I tell you. So yeah, so I think I will wrap up here, and then I'll be happy to answer a question later on. Okay.
Dave, you're up next. I can just advance it for you if you want. Just tell me when.
All right, how many in here have ever been in a wastewater treatment plant? Okay, so a few of you have taken tours. Good. Because the heart and soul of what we're doing with food waste and other waste is anaerobic digestion. And the graphic behind me are a couple of representations of our digesters. The exterior of the building, the circular tanks, they've been there since 1958 when the first wastewater plant was constructed. Now we've changed the mixing inside so that when we introduce not only the wastewater solids, which are typically what this was designed for, but additional waste, we can, put my glasses out. I have notes to keep me on track. All right. So the original digester, wastewater solids. In 2008, we constructed a major upgrade to the digesters. So changed the lids from floating lids to these fixed lids that are insulated with a spray foam. We've got extra mixing inside, and the project was originally intended to treat fog, fats, oil, and grease. And we were bringing that in to the system to boost biogas. Because what we're doing with the biogas is burning it in a couple of microturbines in the plant. If you go to the next slide, I think yeah, because that'll help. So what we have is called a CHP system, a combined heat and power. So we're taking the biogas that's created in the anaerobic digester, and we're using that to, we burn it in the microturbines, and that produces electricity that we use at the plant. And the heat from this process is captured and exchanged through a water jacket to the contents that are in the digester, the solids in the digester. And these digesters, these anaerobic digesters, are mesophilic. So think about the temperature that is either normal for your body or a little elevated. And that's the range that we work with at the plant. And in Fahrenheit, that's 96 to probably around 101 Fahrenheit is kind of our operating range. Hang on, I've got more there. So we're using not only the biogas generated, but we're also using the heat from the digest. Let's see here. Okay, so with this process, it was designed to take fats, oil, and grease. But an interesting thing happened. I opened up the exponent, and there was a story about food waste at the university. And Terry Segelski, who's worked here probably 15 years ago now, he mentioned that they had experimented with composting the food waste from the 5 dining courts, collecting it, composting, but there were odor problems. And as you know, if you've composted, there are certain things that you don't want to put in your compost. Anybody familiar with composting? What don't you want to put in there? Sure. No meat. What's something else that's probably a no-no? Yes. Bones, yeah, they are not going to break down in compost in any way, shape, or form. Well, they had actually put this out near the airport, and they were having odor issues. One person described it as smelling like decomp. So just think about having a pile of compost at the airport that smells like corpses. Not a good look for the university. So they put an end to this, but they had everything in place in the dining courts. These macerators, pulpers, and discharging into these small 30-gallon containers, these toters. And so this was all in place. And I met with Mr. Segelski, had dinner at Wiley Hall, the Wiley Dining Courts, 30 years ago when I was graduating. We actually had dining in the residence halls. So, but the Wiley Dining Courts, afterwards, after we enjoyed our meal, we walked to the back and saw how this was being collected. And it looked like coleslaw. I said, well, it's like baby food for our digesters. So that's how this came to be. We tried it out in 2 weeks of the end of the semester of May 2009. And by the fall of 2009, we were taking all the food waste from the dining courts at the utility. And we've been doing this ever since. All right. So this is the truck. You probably may have seen this around campus, Purdue Recycles. Well, this is the one carrying the food waste to the plant, and 15 to 20 of these small toters are coming from the dining courts. And it's a partnership with the city and the university since 2009. Now, let's get into the data a little bit. Since the beginning of this program, 5.7 million pounds of food waste that we've taken from the university, from the 5 dining courts. Now, per meal, it's only a matter of ounces, but it adds up because of the number of meals that are served. Now, the power that we're producing at the plant, that includes digesting the wastewater solids. And by the way, Purdue University is about 40% of the flow coming into the plant. So when you're not here, we really notice. And when you're not here for a long time, like last year, it starts to hurt. Microterms are idling for months. It's not a good thing. So those total kilowatt hours that we're producing are from everything. Bath soil and grease, the food waste, of course, and then just the regular biosolids. If you move onto the chart. Okay, so now you can see some trends here. Early on, we collected a lot, and it seemed like we were getting really good at collecting the food waste from the university. Now, if you look at, of course, the 2021 isn't done yet, but we're already at about where we were with collections of food waste for 2020 in total. So it's coming back a little bit. But you see how it's kind of flattened out, the food waste collections. Well, at the dining courts, if you're not here, one, I don't have customers using the facilities, the wastewater plant. And two, I don't have all that food waste coming from the dining courts. And so I miss you twice. And I'm glad everybody's able to come back at this point. But you see, 2021, we're still not really doing stellar with the food waste collection. So there's still some remnants of the measures that were put in place at the end of last year when campus reopened. So if you can help, no matter how you're receiving your meals, if the food waste could go into the wastewater plant, that's the best way. Going to landfill, that methane is lost. And the food waste, those materials are gone. They are out of circulation. If it comes to the wastewater plant, guess what? Do you know what happens after we digest those solids in the anaerobic digesters? After it's stable, it goes back to a holding lagoon, and we land apply as a soil amendment to farmland. So returning those nutrients and nitrogen, phosphorus, to the farmland. So we're trying to create more of a circular economy there. It really is. It's something that we've been doing for years, but it really fits into what we're trying to do now to combat climate change and trying to do the right thing. Do you know how much we charge the university for this service? For the food waste and the digesters? Any idea? Zero. It's a partnership with the university and the city. So thank you for what you're doing, and I appreciate the ability to keep this out of the landfill and put it to good use. I think that's it. Yep.
Thanks.
Hello everyone, my name is Madison Hodges, and to give you a little bit of context as to why I'm speaking with you today, I'm a member of the Go Greener Commission, which is West Lafayette's Sustainability Commission, and we have a few initiatives to divert food waste from the community, from residents to the anaerobic digester that Dave just described. And I'm also pretty involved in the Purdue Student Sustainability Council, or at least over my last 3 years here, so I'll be highlighting some of those projects and initiatives in the next couple slides. So as Dave mentioned, our community has a really incredible piece of equipment called an anaerobic digester that takes organic waste and produces energy. So not only are we sending food waste to an alternate source rather than landfill, but the wastewater treatment plant is using less energy from non-renewable sources. So it's a win-win all around. I'm going to highlight a few of the ways that campus food waste is going to this digester and how we as students can interact and engage with those waste streams. So as we just heard about, Purdue Dining has been sending food waste to the digester for the last 10 years. Both leftover scrapes and I believe back of house waste as well. As if any of us have been using the dining courts over the last 2 years, we know that takeaway containers were the primary method last year, so diversion rates went way down. We saw in the data that way less food waste was going to the digester, but that's necessary in public health emergencies. As we're transitioning to post-COVID operations, or what is the new normal, it's really important that we use the infrastructure that's already in place and continue diverting waste if we're producing it. So something to keep in mind. Moving over to the top right corner, in 2019, a few students, myself included, started a program to pick up and collect food waste from Greek houses. 20% of Purdue's student population engages or is a member of a fraternity, sorority, or co-op during their time here. That's a lot of students, and where there's students, there's food. Where there's food, there's waste. So it's really important that we also collect and divert those waste streams. In the first pilot year of operation, we diverted 12,000 pounds from kind of a rotating cast of roughly 8 houses. We had a hiatus due to COVID issues, but we're back in business this fall. We have 7 houses actively participating as of today. And there are 64 houses on campus. So there's massive opportunity for growth. And if any of you are in a Greek house that isn't participating, talk to me. I would love to get you involved. But basically how it works is I find someone interested in the house. They speak with their exec board. We set up a waste collection system. So some of them only collect in their kitchen. Some of them scrape their leftover food into a container in their dining area. And then a couple times a week, streets and sanitation at the city will stop by, pick up the waste, and take it to the digester. Before all that happens, myself and another student would provide signage, educational material, and then give a presentation at the house, educating on food waste reduction, why participating benefits the community, and why it's so important that we do not contaminate food waste that we send to the digester. Going into the bottom right corner, there's also a community drop-off point at the Streets and Sanitation Office, 705 South River Road. And any of us today, here right now, could take food waste to this location, put it in the green toter labeled food waste only, and your food waste will be processed by the digester. Very cool. So that started in March 2019, and since then, the Go Greener Commission has worked with a couple Purdue EEE senior design groups to identify future locations, what's an efficient route, which neighborhoods would have the highest diversion rates, where's their interest. And with that information, we are hoping to install more drop-off points in the next few months. So if you have a car, you are likely to find a location accessible to you. And if you don't have a car, hopefully you will also have a location accessible to you. And then in this bottom quarter here, Purdue residences, question mark. And I have a question mark because that is not actively a food waste stream. But there are students in PSSC who are investigating the possibility of having food waste collection in campus dorms. So, where you take your trash, your recycling, maybe there's also a bucket there to put your food waste. But that poses a lot of logistical questions. That's going to create a lot more work for janitorial staff or waste management. So they're working with people on campus to determine the viability, see if there's interest. So in short, lots of ways to engage. And there's also lots of potential. So like the fraternity, sorority, co-op mission, the community drop-off. We're just getting started, but there's plenty in store. And then I also wanted to highlight student opportunities or student efforts on food waste reduction. We've already seen this food recovery hierarchy thanks to Dr. Engelberth. Oh my goodness. And as you can see, the best thing we can do with our food waste is not produce it. So ideally, before we send waste to the digester, we would like to reduce the amount of waste produced. So Student Sustainability Council has this initiative called Erase the Waste. So perhaps you've seen students on campus with this button on their backpack, but historically they have done food scrapes at the dining courts. So at the end of your meal, rather than take your plate and put it on the conveyor belt, you'd scrape it into a little bucket and they would weigh it and they would publicly shame all of us collectively and say, we produced 60 pounds of waste at lunch in Windsor today. And then the next day we would do the same and they would say, great job, we only did 40 pounds today. That's awesome. Just to create awareness and encourage you to only take, particularly with our buffet style system, only take what you're actually going to consume. And then I know recently they also had a project where it's no waste plates. So when you take your food up to the conveyor belt, if anyone remembers, I don't know how it is now, sometimes that conveyor belt can get very full, very messy, and it's hard to find a place to put your dish without it piling back onto you. So there's, at the top of the conveyor belt, a separate thing with green trays, and if you ate all your food, then you get to put your plate up there and not deal with the mess. And then I also just wanted to point out, we're talking a lot about anaerobic digestion, and that falls under industrial uses here on the food recovery hierarchy. So if you're wondering what that meant or where that would go, that is actually considered better than composting according to the EPA. So that concludes my presentation. But yeah, thank you.
All right, thank you. Panelists, do you guys have questions for them? I'm sure some of you do. Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question on how, what students could do to increase food waste drop-off.
Okay, hold on. You're going to have a microphone. Sorry.
Okay, is it working? Can you guys hear me? Okay, perfect. So I was wondering what students could do to increase food waste drop-off locations on Purdue's campus.
I think I can take that one. So the Go Greener Commission, as I mentioned, is looking into future locations for drop-off locations. And we have jurisdiction or the most control over city-owned property, and Purdue is owned by Purdue. So we as students can advocate for on-campus drop-off locations by conveying interest, engaging with student government. And really the best way, I think, is to work with Purdue staff and faculty rather than be against the machine, because I think a lot of faculty or not faculty, but Purdue employees are willing to work on this issue. You just kind of have to get the ball rolling and do a little bit of the heavy lifting out first, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think, and I'll also add to that too, there's a lot of potential for different locations. So the PMU has lots of places that could potentially have collection from. There's residence halls, as Madison had mentioned. There's also a bunch of catering services that occur in various spots on campus. So there's certainly a lot of potential opportunities, but I think as Madison said, working with Purdue is a better approach. But I also think it's really important to demonstrate numbers and interest in organization. So how can you collectively organize all those signatures and all those voices so that it shows that you all are concerned about these issues? Okay. Another question? Yeah.
Hello. Okay. So yeah, we see composting as a positive thing, but in the food recovery hierarchy that's up there, why is composting least preferred?
That's a good question.
Is it scale?
I think it's management and scale, because generally compost works most easily at a smaller scale. And it's a lot of people have a compost at their own home, but a lot of people don't necessarily know if they're doing it right or how to do it. And a lot of people then let it go by the wayside. So they'll start it, they get excited about it, they do it, and then it just kind of goes away. So unless you're really invested in it and kind of know what you're doing with it, it's not as easy to manage. So I think having some of these things that are more easily managed are preferred, because compost can be somewhat of a trend instead.
Well, and I think to Dave's example too, right? If you want to scale it, then you have this decomposition smelling site that is
Right.
perhaps not preferable to the public.
And it attracts things too, like other animals besides those little microbiota want to be in there. Especially, I mean, that's one of the big reasons you don't put meat in too.
I think another reason is that because if you talk about the valorization, so you talk about the value. If you utilize it, you want to increase the value. So compared to other, let's say the industrial use, you put into the different, convert that into the chemicals or even turn into the animal feeds or something else. I mean, it's more. I mean, it has a higher value due to the more revenue in terms of that compared to the compost. So that's another reason that EPA will recommend to other pathways compared to compost.
Question there?
Okay, so I believe the first two panelists talked about or projected somewhere between 44 and 56% of food waste comes from residential homes. So in that case, and I did notice that the third panelist mentioned that when Purdue students aren't here, you know, they're missing us. So I don't know if any of you guys can answer this question, but how, I remember also the first panelist mentioned the complexity of collection, but how hard is it really to integrate collecting food waste with like trash and recycling? You know, we're able to pick that up and deliver mail and everything. So what do we got to do to try to get that implemented to West Lafayette and Lafayette? So more like the private sector as opposed to just like the public institutions.
It's a really good question.
So I think the biggest thing is household education. So each household would need to be educated on what can go into the food waste, why it would go in there. Everyone would then be charged some amount for that pickup. So right now, we are, in the city of West Lafayette, we are charged for trash collection. And it doesn't matter how much trash you make, you are charged the same amount every month. We also have the luxury of putting whatever we want out there. If we put it out there, it's gonna get picked up, either by like random curb people that come find it or by the city, which is kind of incredible because I've lived in cities where if you don't have like a special sticker for it or anything like that, like it won't get picked up. So I think, you know, there would be another bin then. And then how do you, for some people that's gonna get a little gross because first of all, like our trash containers already get a little gross. So you put this food waste container in your garage or wherever you're gonna put it, and it sits there collecting food scraps all week, and then you take it to the curb, it's gonna be really gross. Like, so how do we do that? Do we put it all like in special bags? Like, do people have bags? I think there's just a lot of logistics involved that we as a culture haven't quite gotten to yet.
Can I expand on that?
Yeah.
Okay, so as you mentioned about being in a different city where they, you needed stickers and whatnot. So my family comes from Montreal, and in Montreal they have little green containers where they put food scraps and they collect. And I also know, like, I'm pretty sure in South Korea, the food collection and food waste is free, but they have to pay per pound of trash. So I think you make a really good point about educating people upon that, but can we study how other cities have done it or other countries or anywhere?
Of course, and that's being done. But you are talking about other cultures now too. So we're talking about a cultural shift in like how we perceive some of these things, and it's not instant is all. So
Okay.
there's a lot of involved to take it from where we are now, and kind of shifting to that area.
So education might be a really, like if we could integrate Purdue University students to try to get out there and educate people on the topic, do you think that would be a good idea?
I think it's going to be the same way how we stopped smoking, how smoking is now, because everyone knows how terrible it is for you. Like, I don't know anyone that smokes anymore. It's that same type of, but it's a long-term cultural shift.
So I'll jump in and say, I'll put on my Go Greener hat, right? So if you have the energy and the excitement, I would love for you to come to a Go Greener meeting. We meet once a month. It's the third Tuesday of the month at 6 p.m. If you leave your email and name back there, we'll make sure you get the link. But these are just the perfect kinds of projects that we would like to support you in working on. It's a policy change, but it's a long game change. So you're going to have to be willing to probably not see it happen while you're at Purdue, but know that maybe the next generations of students can make it happen, because this is great. We've talked about it as a commission, actually, But we don't have the manpower and the energy right now to add it as another initiative. But if you want to come to the meetings and join, we actually have 2 commissioner seats open. I'd love to have you. So there's my Go Greener plug.
I wanted to just add to that in Indianapolis, they have 2 companies who actually do that. And it is composting, organic composting, and they pay like a fee about $20 a month. And they will come to your house and do exactly that. So, but it's like as I think Lindsay and Abby were both saying, it's kind of an education type thing. Bloomington also has that. So I think that West Lafayette and Lafayette might be, on the road to do that. I think the potential is there, but you have to have like that business model that works. So in Indianapolis, you contribute your compost, and then once a year you can actually take that compost back to enrich your garden. So it's kind of cool. And in terms of like longer schemes, like we'll have the link up for the webinar from USDA, but in Vermont, it's actually against the law to have organic waste in your garbage that's picked up. So, I mean, and that's more like Montreal and a very forward-thinking, massive citizen right approach. So I think what Abby's saying too, particularly in Indiana, it's a struggle to get there, but I think you're right that if you can get it's a great opportunity for business or an entrepreneurship if you can get that kind of initiative going. Mm-hmm. And also, just as a side point, we know that the dining halls are not using real plates right now. And so we called them about that this week, and they said that it's not just the fact that we had the issues with COVID, with like sanitation, but that they don't have enough people to actually wash the dishes. So they asked us to make a plug to tell people to go, they just got a pay raise, and that they're trying to get particularly students to help restart the amount of food scraping that they had been doing. But I think this idea of the reduction from take away fewer containers, recycle the ones that you do, et cetera, are good points on campus too.
I want to add something because you talk about education. I think that's really important thing. I want to give you another examples, and we have done a study before because in the food science part, we always trying to develop new technology to extend the shelf life because we think people might think that if the shelf life is longer, then you are less likely to waste them, right? Because we conducted a survey and we said that okay, so we have many ways to extend the shelf life to kill the bacteria or something to make it on the shelf longer. But we found that there's a survey told us that even we can extend the shelf life by 1 week or even 1 month. Okay, so the response we got is that okay, if there's an original shelf life, and then the people might be 70%, like 70% of the participants saying that they can finish all the food they purchased without generating any waste. But if we can extend the shelf life by, let's say, 1 week or even up to 1 month, and then 1 month is incredible. I mean, from the science point of view, it's quite it's doable, but it will cost you a lot from the manufacturer side in terms of packaging, processing, anything. But the responses we got is that it only increased by like 10%, saying that only 85% said that even it's 1 month, 85% people will totally consume the food they purchase. What does that say? It says that some people just leave it in the back of their refrigerator. They forgot it. It doesn't matter about how long the shelf life is. Mm-hmm. So that's the information I can share. That's education. The food waste is never like a technical issues. And okay, probably in some like what I mentioned. So probably in the developing country, yes, it is. Probably they need some techniques to improve the storage, the transportation, this and so on. But in the developed country, it's more important. It's about education. So even we extend the shelf life for 1 month, like fresh milk extended for 1 month, and then people they can still not consume all of them. They will still generate waste. So that's another example I can share about the importance of the education. Yeah.
Other questions? Yeah. Ava?
What specific steps can someone in a Greek life organization or co-op take to become a part of the program you were talking about before?
Talk to me, pretty much. But talk to the people in your organization and see if they're interested and what approval steps you would need to take internally, if it needs to be like a vote, if you have a board of directors, anything like that that needs to get approval, because that can take quite a few weeks. But one barrier to implementation or challenge that is posed to us specifically with the digester system is that contamination can pose some really big issues. So if there's a fork that gets put in the food waste, then it's going to be processed through a grinder before it gets in the digester, and it could take out the whole equipment and the whole operation. So one person throwing in the wrong thing could prevent thousands of pounds of waste from Purdue Dining, but also all of the organic waste from our sewage. It prevents all of that from being processed. So in short, in a Greek house, I would love to have everyone participate, but only if everyone is on board and committed. So gauge interest, talk to me, and we'll make it happen.
I can connect the two of you. Other questions you guys have?
Hello. The anaerobic digester is powered with methane, which is a greenhouse gas, and surely produces some sort of emission. Is the thought process behind that if the waste were to end up in a landfill, it would decompose and produce the same effect, so we may as well make use of it, or possibly that this sort of energy production doesn't have the negative effects that drilling for oil or fracking or finding natural gas in another way might have?
Yes, anaerobic digestion has been around for decades. The products, methane, about 60% of it is methane gas, and we are constructed so that we can capture this, and then we burn it in the microturbines, which have emissions, but very, very little emissions. I mean, it's to the point where the state reviewed our plant, and rather than a full-blown air permit, which a lot of the wastewater plants have, we have what's called a registration. It's basically us certifying that we're going to keep it in good working order so that the emissions are that low. But yes, the methane is a potent greenhouse gas, and it's better to produce it at a wastewater plant where we are equipped to handle it, to capture it, and to use it, rather than a landfill where it's, even with landfill capture, is not, it's not ideal. It's kind of shoehorned in after the fact. So we were designed to do this.
Mm-hmm. Good question, though.
Anaerobic digestion is pretty common for recovery and production of methane. So it's used the world over. There's a lot of digesters all throughout Europe that will take organic matter in and produce electricity that's sold basically directly back to the grid. So it's really common and generally low maintenance way of doing some things.
Actually, in Denmark, I visited a facility that takes food waste from the whole village of Grindsted, and their wastewater plant uses that. They are a net energy producer at this point. They've covered their needs. On a good day, I get 20% of my energy needs from my digester and microturbines. But at Grindsted, they've gone way beyond that. Of course, the climate's a little different, and the country of Denmark has the population of Wisconsin, so it's a very smaller, and electricity is very expensive. So the economics and just the drivers are different. Unfortunately, we have cheap power here in Indiana, and the power that I displace, that 20%, the rest of it I have to purchase from Duke. And it's about 9 cents per kilowatt hour, even with the demand charges for a high user, like moving water.
Other questions?
I have a question. Can I ask a question? Is the city doing anything to partner with like the high schools, elementary schools, daycares, anything like that to collect food waste from some of those like cafeterias?
We had a couple of students several years ago, Artie and,
Yeah, it's been like 10 years ago now.
oh wow, 10 years ago. Time
Yeah.
flies.
Yeah.
Anyway, and we did a pilot that they spearheaded, but we have an industrial scale. And it's plus or minus 20 pounds. So wasn't quite the right. So we got a bathroom scale to be able to measure this because it didn't even fill up a garbage bag. I mean, it was
Okay.
like a quarter full. And there's such little food waste. I probably spent more, unfortunately, and gas to go pick it up from the high school each day than the value from that. So, yeah, these small things, it'd be nice to be able to find a better solution for that. But yeah, we've tried that.
Okay.
It is. But, the university, I have friends that deal with prisons. And wherever there's a large amount of people, they have to eat. And there's going to be stuff left over, post-consumer waste, and then the food prep waste, as you mentioned. So, yeah.
Well, I was just wondering because I have young children and I see how much food is left on the plate all the time. And I'm like, man, if I could just, collect that a little bit better. And
Well,
I'm not
I
going to eat
wonder-
it because
I
they've
wonder-
touched it. So.
I wonder too, Dave, so that was with high school. I wonder if it's any different at the lower levels. Did you do anything? Because I don't think we tried at like elementary schools, did we? And I wonder if the scale would be different.
I really don't know.
Might be worth exploring.
Because I know when my kids were going through that, food was prepared at a central location, then transported to the other schools.
Right.
So it wasn't like when I was a child and lunch was prepared at the school.
Right.
It was cooked. It wasn't just warmed up. So it is a little different.
Yeah.
So
Interesting.
I don't know. That's a good question.
Yeah. Any other questions from you all? Yeah.
I was just wondering if paper products are considered waste in the anaerobic digester, like napkins, paper plates.
Honestly, they won't break down in the process because in the digester, the temperature, as I said, is pretty much, it's mesophilic. It's 96 to 101 degrees Fahrenheit. And it's held in there on average 21 to 24 days. So it's not long enough to break down those sorts of things. It's just not designed for that.
And even compostable products will not break down. There's a certain type.
We tried them.
We've tried them. This was a senior design project years ago, and even those don't work. So, yeah. Any other? Yeah.
I was just wondering how much you depended on the food waste as an energy source. Like, if I know the first step is to prevent food waste in general, like, would that negatively affect the amount of energy that you could produce?
The bulk of what's in a digester are solids from wastewater. So that's the majority of it. And rule of thumb is you don't want more than 30% of your digester volume to be these additional feedstocks. Food waste, we're nowhere near that at this point. And the fats, oil, and grease is something that is delivered by grease haulers occasionally now. 10 years ago, we had a brisk business going, and now not so much. But yeah, we do the fat, salt, and grease, the food waste. We have taken some one-off loads of off-spec salad dressing, tanker full of it, Past its expiration date, baby food.
No.
That was a large quantity of that. So there have been some. I've had discussions with tomato processing plants, ice cream processing. Wherever there's food waste. Actually, what I would love to have is a large-scale brewery in the greater Lafayette area, because brewery waste has a great biomethane potential. I would love that. But, yeah.
And there's, there's certainly places like grocery stores that you think would be fantastic sources, but you have to deal with the packaging problems. So there's like the complexities in getting the food into the food waste. But yeah. One final question. How's that? Final question?
Maybe I can ask one. So, I'm not the, I haven't worked on the anaerobic digestion before, but I know that it's about the carbon and nitrogen ratio. You need to, in order to make sure that it has a best energy efficiency. And that. So once you collected the food waste, I mean, do you, how to say, categorize them or do anything to separate that, or just put them together? Because as we said, you don't want meat in it, and then what would you do after you collect them? So you divide them into the different types. More abundant is the carbon, source, it's a nitrogen source, and then to mix them in the best ratio?
No, actually, because of the small amount compared to what's under digestion, we haven't done that. We have done some testing initially. That's where I got the data from the dining courts that it's just mere ounces per meal that are actually being scraped off plates at that point. They went trailless for a while as they experiment to see that if you wouldn't take more. But no, we haven't really, it's not enough of the volume of the digester to really have to dial in to that degree.
I see.
I'd love to have that problem.
Yeah. And also, I'm curious, is that because now, I mean, in the past year, I do the grocery shopping, I noticed that like Meijer or like a Payless, I mean, the price is going up, right? I mean, so do you find the trend, I mean, if when the food price going up, I mean, the food waste generated, you collect it, is going down, or is there any trend according to the food price compared to the food waste you collected, or?
I've never tracked that
metric.
But I know what you're talking about, because I know when I go shopping, the same amount of money gets me a lot fewer bags.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So that's something.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. Well, thank you, panelists, for coming this evening. We appreciate it. And thank you all for attending. Have a wonderful night.